All right, so describe Wilson's 14 points. What was Wilson's 14th point? Okay, explain why Wilson's plan did not work for Europe and the rest of the world. So make sure you turn in your assignment, Treaty of Versailles. I will grade that. Okay, we went over it quite a bit already, so it's not like we're going to review it. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with that. So have that turned in. Current events, Caroline and Wyatt for Friday. All right, okay. So we talked about President Wilson's involvement here along with the Big Four, right? So he's a part of the Big Four when it came to the peace negotiations after World War I. So known as the Paris Peace Conference, met at the Palace of Versailles. All right, so real quick, with the Treaty of Versailles, was that looking for peace, or was it trying to do something else? What was the intentions with it? Connor?
It was basically the limits of Germany's ability to function as a country, just not make it a little power.
Yeah, good job, right? So in ways, the Allied powers were trying to restrict Germany, try to penalize them, punish them. They faced the sole blame of the war, and to make sure that they never rise as world power again. Okay, at the start of the war, even before, we talked about Germany's rise. We mentioned about how they were beating up literally on all these European countries in Central Europe, and they even challenged Great Britain when it came to their naval power. So with that naval arms race. All right, so if you're the Allied powers, you want to make sure that you can, in other words, handcuff, you can limit Germany's rise to power again. All right, so with that, right, the Treaty of Versailles was aimed to try to punish, burden Germany for the future, here on out, make sure that they never become a world power. All right, so with Wilson's 14 points, okay, this was a way to try to provide stability, structure, peace to Europe. All right, one thing I talked about yesterday, though, what was President Wilson facing? It was a personal issue, it was more of a health-related issue. What happened?
He had a stroke.
Yeah, he had a stroke, right? And when he had with that, it caused a lot of issues when it came to really just preparing for his job, when it came to communicating his ideas or his intentions. And let's face it, with the United States, did we really face the hardships or the effects of this war quite like these other European countries? No. So these European powers were looking at the United States kind of as an outsider. It's like, yeah, you came in at the end of the war, you really didn't lose as many men as we did, obviously, not even close. And now all of a sudden, here your president's going through some health-related issues, and he can't really communicate his ideology. So it's going to be a pretty bad standing, really, for the U.S. All right, but what leg does the United States have to stand on? What were they going to provide for Europe after this war? Boy, go ahead.
Money.
Yeah, money, right? When it comes to its industrial might, right? It's still there offering a means of helping the European countries rebuild. Right, all these other European countries, they're affected by the war. Their industrial areas were all destroyed. And if you look at Great Britain, right, yeah, they weren't affected by the conflict near as much, obviously, as France or Germany, but they still lost a generation of men. Men that would fill the industries and factories that pump out these goods. So, yeah, a lot of these European countries depended on the United States. So that's how they had a little bit of power when it came to negotiations. All right, so for the most part, with Wilson's 14 points, all of them leading up to the 14th point is really detailing about reshaping Europe when it comes to boundaries, when it comes to providing open diplomacy, when it comes to foreign relations. Okay, and then finally, the 14th point is the creation of the what? What organization? Oh, let's go ahead. The League of Nations. Yep, good job. So with the League of Nations, this is the predecessor, right? The one that came before the United Nations, which we have today. And this is where all these European countries, the countries around the world would come together and they talk about certain issues, grievances, conflicts before a war would break out. So this is a great idea, right? It's a great idea to try to prevent future warfare from happening. Okay. One thing to note, though, who did not join? Who didn't join? Parker, the United States, right? So even though it was President Wilson's idea, right, the United States didn't join. Why? Why did the U.S. say no? Why did Congress say no to this? And so Congress had the final decision here, and they said no, going against President Wilson's idea. Matt, go ahead.
Hey, you just thought it'd be best to stay out of any wars.
Yeah, right. Because if we're involved here with these negotiations and these talks, let's say if another war does break out in Europe, who's going to have to join right from the get-go? The United States. So they thought the best way for the U.S. to stay out of these international issues is if we isolate ourselves again, right? How can we isolate ourselves? What do we have in between us and Europe and us and Asia? Jason? Yeah, the oceans, right? The Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So we can isolate, we can stay separate from a lot of these other international problems and conflicts. So that's why we didn't join. So yesterday I showed you that political cartoon, The Bridge. So the missing piece was the centerpiece, right? The keystone. And that was representing the United States. Will that bridge be a sound structure without the centerpiece? No. Right? So I think that political cartoon kind of hits home and explains how the League of Nations was in many ways doomed to fail from the very beginning because the United States not being involved. right? Not being there when it comes to providing that structure and those negotiations. All right, last thing I want to talk about. So we talked about a few countries and how they were pushed aside, how their voices weren't heard whatsoever at the Treaty of Versailles. Right? What countries were that? Obviously Germany, right? They're getting burned and they're getting punished. Right, so that one's a dead giveaway. Who else? Connor, go ahead.
Anyone outside the big four pretty much pushed away.
Yeah, okay, good job. So, yeah, anybody that's not in the big four, the allied powers here that were starting negotiations. But there's one of the big four that wasn't really heard too much. Who's that? He actually left part way through these negotiations and came back later, but he still wasn't heard too well. Connor, go ahead. Yeah, Italy, good job. So Orlando, who was a representative of Italy, he actually left the treaty negotiations because he wasn't given what? That Great Britain promised that if they jump side, they jump ship, the Allied powers. Chris, land, right? Land. So yeah, Italy was left out, right? You got to imagine here. I know I didn't mention it when we were talking about Germany unifying, but Italy was unifying as a country right around the same time. So their goal is just to expand, right? To get more land. And then joining the Allied powers was a way for them to claim a little bit more land. And they didn't get it. So you have Italy disgruntled. They are upset. Obviously Germany. Who else? Who else? Matt, go ahead. Japan. Yep, good job. So Japan was on what side of the conflict in World War One?
Allied.
Yeah, the Allied powers. Good job. So they helped out when it came to Germany's overseas territories and taking out their military bases in Asia, right? And when they send these delegates, these representatives to the League of Nations, were they heard at all? Were they heard at the Treaty of Versailles? No. No. A lot of the European countries just dismissed it. They didn't listen to anything they had to say. So they got up and left too, right? They didn't even want to hear about some of the negotiations, the discussions, because they weren't being heard whatsoever. All right, so moving forward. So here is a foreshadowing, right? Event. What three countries make up the Axis powers in World War II? Chris, go ahead. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So you can see at the end of World War I already, right, the building up to World War II. And a lot of it, unfortunately, it does fall on the laps of the Allied powers. They're the ones who are dictating what goes on. They're looking to punish some of these countries or just not even listening to what they have to say. So that's some problems, some issues that stem out of the Treaty of Versailles. And just with the lack of structure of the League of Nations, with the United States not joining, well, we can see how this Second World War is already brewing. All right, so here are your terms for today. So today we're going to talk about the effects of the war. And then later this week, we'll talk about some of the economic issues when we get to Germany. That's going to lead them into our next chapter when we get to the buildup of World War II. All right, so we're going to talk about the Spanish influenza. Oh, no. A virus that leaks out. Oh, boy. Jeez. Sounds a lot like COVID. Crazy. All right, you got the Red Scare. We talked a little bit about that already. All right, and then we have Sacco and Vanzetti. Sacco Vanzetti, however you pronounce it. So this is an interesting story where maybe this Red Scare is heightened fear, paranoia of these anarchists come out. All right, so again, make sure you turn to your assignment. I will grade those Treaty of Versailles assignments here soon enough. All right, okay, the Spanish influenza, what do we have? What do we got? Where did it originate? Did it start in Spain? Is that what they call it, the Spanish influenza, the Spanish flu? Huh?
Sounds like it originated in Canada. Spanish flu.
Oh, man. Okay. What do we got? Someone, please? Anybody? Chris, do you have your hand up? No? Okay. All right, so anyway, the Spanish influenza, it was first seen actually in the United States in 1980. As we were preparing for the war effort, remember we talked about the Selective Service Act? Remember we talked about some of the training and trying to get our troops ready to roll for World War One? Well, it actually originated in the U.S., but were we allowed to talk about it, discuss about it? No. Why? Because when it came to our military, right, we were trying to censor what may was going on, what was maybe happening. Okay, so a lot of the news about this outbreak of this flu was censored by the military. Okay, was it right? Probably not. Also, when you think about it, as we're getting involved in this war, right, our factories, our industries are shifting for this war effort. Okay, and for Woodrow Wilson, he saw this as an opportunity, right, for the United States to do what as an industrial power in the world? What? Rise, right? To elevate itself. So if word gets out about this flu, this pandemic here, this virus, chances are you might see the United States not reach those levels. You might not see them reach those objectives. Austin, you good? Katie, you good? It's not say you guys should get a room maybe, but can't do that. Can't do that. All right, in any case, right, with the Spanish influenza, right, this spreads over to Europe, obviously, because we're getting involved. Our troops are going across the Atlantic Ocean, which we mentioned. And we already mentioned about trench warfare. You have all these troops jam-packed on top of each other. Do they have the proper means of food, of health, sanitary conditions, and supplies? No, we don't, right? Especially back in the early 1900s. We have no idea what kind of these viruses are. We don't have the means of technology to help prevent the spread of this virus or even know about it, right? So it's one of those things here where as we're getting involved in World War I, and you have all these troops, all these soldiers, jam-packed close quarters, and not living in the best conditions, trench warfare, we mentioned about trench lifestyle, it was brutal. So this virus spread pretty quick all around the world. And the first signs of it was actually reported in Spain. That's why it gets the name of it, because they're the ones talking about it in the newspapers. Right? They're the ones talking about it in their media. Was Spain really a part of World War I? No, they were neutral. So that's where it gets its name, the Spanish influenza. In all reality, it's probably originated in the United States. But with the Spanish influenza, it was first seen in the newspapers and the media in Spain. So that's why it gets the name Spanish flu. All right, so with that, right, this kills more people than the war itself. More people than the war itself. 50 million people died from this flu. Right, so you can compare it maybe to the Black Plague, what we talked about at the start of the year, early on in September, right, and how this spread rampant throughout the world. Again, there was no really precautions to this virus. With Woodrow Wilson especially, he's not going to shut down these industries, these factories because of this virus. Again, he sees the opportunity for the United States to rise as a world power and continue to rise at that level, right? And he doesn't really do too much about it. Kind of turns a blind eye to it, right? While many people, not only the soldiers, obviously they're going to come back home, so this is going to spread all throughout the United States, which right around 600,000 people die from this Spanish flu in the United States, which is comparable to Civil War, right? How many people died, soldiers died, Americans died in the Civil War, which is wild to think about, crazy to think about. So you can look at this Spanish influenza, maybe compare it to some of the fear, the paranoia with COVID-19, right? And you can maybe look at it, how it relates. Okay, which you'll have an assignment here soon, we're going to have to do that. The Red Scare, we talked about the Red Scare already. So you have this virus leaking out, you have the Spanish flu leaking out, oh boy. Now you have the Red Scare, which is another virus for some people, right, Oz?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, okay, so what was the fear of this red? Oh my gosh, Chris, look out. So what is this scare all about? Alana, communism, yeah, good job. So we talked about the Bolsheviks, right? We talked about Vladimir Lenin, we mentioned about how Russia leaves the war early. How they go through this Bolshevik revolution, this communist revolution, where the working class rises up against the wealthy elite owners. And then you see a government takeover, government control of all means of production, pricing, demand, you name it, right? So with that, communism is a huge threat to democracy. It's a huge threat to capitalism, what the United States is all about. A lot of these Western democratic European countries. So this Red Scare, especially with a lot of the immigration coming into the United States at this time, especially from Russia and the Soviet Union, this could be a huge fear that they're infiltrating the United States, that they're coming into the United States and spreading these communist beliefs, where you might see anarchy, you might see chaos, you might see a lot of rebellions or riots spur up all throughout the U.S., demanding for, let's say, equal class system. So this communistic threat was scary, right? It was the next threat to the United States after World War I, right? So as Germany's defeated, we see, again, Red Scare communism come around. Okay, all right, so with that, we'll mention a little bit more in American history about the Palmer raids and how the bureaucracy of the FBI is now shifting towards that new threat and spying in on people, listening into people's conversations, throwing people in jail because they might have an affiliation with the Communist Party. Oh boy, look out. One of the unique court cases was about Eugene Debs. He ran against Woodrow Wilson in the next presidency in 1916, which is interesting. Here he was, this communist, he had this affiliation with communism, and it threw him into jail. And he was still running for president, and he actually received over 1 million votes. 1 million votes in jail because this communist backing his political affiliation. So this was a big concern. This guy in jail, not even campaigning, not even out in the streets, giving maybe his spiel of what he's going to do as president. And he received over 1 million votes. It's wild to think about. So that's maybe what ramped up this Red Scare even more. And this hysteria, this witch hunt for these communists. All right, last one here. We got Sacco Vanzetti, Sacco Vanzetti. What do you got, Connor?
Basically, they were charged with robbery and murder at a shoe factory, and protests worldwide that they were basically being charged because of the anti-political activities.
Yeah, good job, right? So these were Italian immigrants, and they were affiliated with this anarchical political ideology, more of this communist revolutionary ideology. And some people believe they're falsely accused of murder, falsely accused of these crimes in the United States. Again, just ramping up this fear, this paranoia in the U.S. over the Red Scare. And these two were put to electric chair and killed. Oh boy. Parker, you got that? Or you just messing around here on that? Yeah, it looks like it. How about you just get off of that, please? Thanks. I'm calling out people left and right, so listen up on YouTube. Listen up. Look out. All right, so let's go to the slides here. I only got one slide for you. That's it. Well, technically two. Technically two.
Are you gonna make a diss track of it?
Yeah, probably. All right, so there you go. We talked about the 1918 influenza virus, right? The Spanish flu, the Spanish influenza. And attached to the video lesson, which I'd like you to check out, we can read together, is a poem written about the Spanish flu. And again, at the time, not many people knew about how to really prepare themselves for this flu, for this pandemic. And there are many pictures out there of hospitals, of even gyms and community centers, makeshift hospitals at the time to try to prepare for the spread of this virus. People wearing masks. It looks a lot like 2019, 2020, right? When it comes to the COVID-19 breakout, right? So you can see how it's almost 100 years after the fact of COVID-19 and how this pandemic just spread like wildfire. A lot of it, again, because of the war. A lot of it because you have troops jam-packed against each other living in the trenches in these unsanitary, unsafe conditions. And then when they come home or return home, right, all of a sudden you see this virus spread pretty quick. Again, you have people all around the world coming together for this conflict, for this war. The first time, really, you have this interaction of these people from around the world at a global level. And you can only imagine just how, right, these unsanitary conditions in the trench just would elevate this virus to spread even more. But this virus attacks the lungs, okay, causing pneumonia and causing hardships when it comes to breathing. And that's how it just really penetrates the immune system and kills people through the respiratory system. So Spanish flu attacking the lungs, a little bit different than COVID-19, but again, having a large effect on the immune system. All right, we talked about women in the war, right? How they helped when it came to producing goods and materials, supplies for the war effort, right? Leading to the what amendment? Women's suffrage, Cadia. The what? Yeah, the 19th Amendment. Yes, good job. Good. All right. Also, right, we mentioned about the Red Scare. We talked a little bit about that already when it came to communism. We mentioned about Lenin, how Russia leaves the war, and how the Soviet Union is created with this new communist revolution and the fear, the spread of communists around the world. Came to a point where we actually changed one of our baseball team names, Cincinnati Reds. Changed the name because it said red in it. Oh, geez. Wild stuff. Wild stuff. What? No, I didn't. They can't see it. Can't see it. All right, so European immigrants were, again, feared here when it comes to this anarchical political system, this communist system where they're looking to overthrow the government, the rebellions that are going to lead to government change that's more suited for the people. This fear, this paranoia of government overthrow led to the maybe the false conviction and deaths of Sacco and Vanzetti, who were a part of this ideology, this political ideology that might tear down the United States from the inside out. So they were put to death, and this was spread worldwide. How these two individuals were maybe just part of this hysteria, this paranoia that the United States was going through with the Red Scare, going through with this idea of communism spreading throughout the US, and maybe they weren't a part of these murders, which looking at it now, there was some proof that they were a part of it. So I don't know, take it for what it's worth, I guess. But this hit the world stage. This hit news all around the United States when it comes to this fear, this spread of communism. So don't wear red in here, Chris. Okay. All right, so there's some pictures. The red menace is real. Look out. Oh boy, look out. So report everything about communism that you see. Yeah. Is there communism going on back there? You too? I thought so. You, Parker? Yes, I see it. Okay. Anyway, with the Palmer raids, okay, the creation of the FBI, listening into conversations, rooting through people's mail, that Espionage and Sedition Act just ramps up even more after World War I. But this time the enemy is communists. All right, and then you can see some pictures here of really the Spanish flu, the influenza, that outbreak that spread all around the world. Again, a lot of it because the interaction of people from around the world. First time really we see that at this international level because of World War I. Trench lifestyle really making things worse, right? You have the harsh conditions in the trenches and people jam-packed together with low food, low supplies, lack of sleep, their immune systems are weakened, and this flu, this virus spreads pretty quick. And then we talk about Sacco and Vanzetti. All right, okay. Shh, quiet, quiet. Thank you. Shh, shh, shh. All right, so with that, okay, here is the poem I'd like you to read here. Oh boy, the influenza poem. So who would like to read this?
Did you say Connors?
Connor, yes. Connor is the design reader here. So let's read this here. Spanish flu. So this was written about the influenza, 1919.
I cough, I sneeze, I snort, I weep.
Jeez.
I'm a perfect friend. My head is dough, my nose won't go. I've got the influenza. I shake, I ache, every joint, and every motion run. Dog on dawn, that brought us all. This Spanish flu. I kick the cats
Whoa.
and break their slats, can everything offend. I rip and roar, life's one big war, but I have you. I fill my skin every day. The pesky neighbors sing, and vainly hope, nasty dope, hear this empty life. Jeez. For vain is hope, and vain is dope. Let angels come and tend me. I'll peaceful lie, and
Martyr died.
martyr die. Spanish influenza.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that sounded dope. How about it? Wow. Good, good. Thank you, Connor. That was good. I think you have a career after high school here. Maybe you can get into rapping or writing poems or something cool like that.
You're gonna Mom is gonna sing the diss track over.
Yes, I'm going to be your manager, okay? Yeah, I'm going to be your manager. All right.
About this-
Okay, so you can see just the paranoia, right? The fear of Spanish influenza, how it might spread. But obviously a lot different today with media when it comes to precautionary measures, when it comes to just technology itself. Back then, they didn't have that really at all. All right, so we're gonna watch a video.